I'm going to talk about the history of CrossFit a little bit, but has anyone seen any of the old CrossFit videos of like Greg Glassman doing this type of stuff?
No. Oh, I'd love to see that.
It's fascinating. Good? All right. How's everyone doing? So I'm going to throw this out there real quick. So this is the first time I'm doing this particular discussion. I said hour and a half to 2 hours. There's a ton of stuff we could talk about, and I can go off on tangents every now and then if I'm not careful. No, the basic CrossFit Level 1 certification is a 2-day, all-day seminar. We're going to try to jam a bunch of that stuff into hour and a half to 2 hours. But I was saying, if you didn't hear me, there is some anonymous sheets here if you want to put in the bucket afterwards for what you were hoping to hear, what you thought, anything. I'm going to follow up with all you guys afterwards, particularly about specific things that you might want to be reminded about that I talk about. I can share this whole slideshow with you if you want. But basically, we're going to get right into it. You guys ready? Okay. My first Google slideshow as well. So basically, our mission as a gym is to help as many people as possible. Right? This was my goal from day one. I discovered CrossFit. I was always in service industry, right? Liked helping people. And my goal was to create an organization to help as many people as possible. Obviously, living in LA, the problem is space, right? Which creates some specific challenges that we have that, like my mom does CrossFit in suburbia. Their problem is too much space, not enough people, right? But figuring out that challenge, that's what I've been focusing on the last couple years. When we opened, I was the guy that coached every single class practically. And then based on some challenges, I was stuck more behind the scenes for the last couple years, kind of figuring out how can we make a system in which anyone can accomplish their goals, right? Because it's a pretty complex challenge. So that's our goal though. I have a lot of people that tell me, you can't make everybody happy. And I say, well, you can only try. Right, so we're going to talk a little bit about that philosophy as well as what you guys experience in your group class. So that brings us to the question: what are your goals, your individual goals? Right. One of the cool parts of CrossFit, in our opinion, is that we have a philosophy in here I'll talk about called "Everything is Everything," and that your fitness is not this isolated part of your life. Being healthy is not separate from everything else, and that it has an impact. And that scary word I used to not use when talking about this is lifestyle, right? I've had people I've talked to that say, I don't want to start CrossFit because I don't want to become that person, right? Even though they recognize that maybe it's a healthier person, they feel like they become somebody different, right? If they dedicate to this stuff. But the idea is knowing your goals. Why are you doing this? It's different for every one of you. And as we go through this, we're going to start off just with some broad ideas and hopefully narrow it down to hit some of your specific goals. And this is what I want to follow up with you guys about in emails afterwards as well, okay? So one of the things we're going to start with is just defining terms. What is fitness, what is health, and what is CrossFit? This is one of the critical parts of having this conversation, health and fitness goals, right? And you ask people, what is health and fitness? And it's kind of one of those things that you get some different answers. So starting with fitness, how do you measure fitness? You guys want to throw it out there? How do you measure somebody's fitness?
I mean, there is a definition that's, I think it's work capacity across broad time and model domains.
Yes, that's the CrossFit answer. Look at that.
I wish the videos.
Let's say this. If you had two people, how do you measure who's fitter than somebody else? How would you do it?
Strength and endurance.
Right. That's a good answer, right? You got kind of like, how strong are they and can they run really far, right? What this is really saying is take this list of physical skills. This is a classic CrossFit idea of 10 physical skills. And take a look at that list. We got cardiorespiratory endurance, stamina, strength, speed, agility, flexibility, accuracy, balance, power, coordination, right? And your fitness is your ability to perform well in any of these areas. Do you have any major holes in that? The way that I describe it is you can do anything, right? That you're willing to try anything, you can perform it with some general proficiency. But going back to this list, right? Most people look at this and right away they're aware of the things that they suck at, yes. Right? And the things that they're good at. And we see a lot of people get stuck focusing on the things that they're good at, right? You have people that go to the classes that they enjoy, they skip the classes that they don't want to do, and this is not just in CrossFit, but in the general world of fitness, right? People like running long distance, they like the spin classes, they like yoga, but they don't like strength training. And you got people on the opposite end of the spectrum. They love lifting weights and they can't stand running, they can't stand working on flexibility. We're saying your fitness is all of these things. When you measure your fitness, you should be looking at multiple points, right? So that's just a basic idea of fitness. You can do anything, okay? Just try to keep it broad and pretty straightforward. It's your ability to do anything, and it's a snapshot of where you are right now, right? So we would test, let's say the CrossFit Open coming up. We're going to do 5 different tests of your fitness, right? And that way it's going to give us an idea of where you're at, and you'll be able to see your weak spots in there. The more tests you do, the better snapshot it's going to give you. So what about health? How do you measure health? How do you measure it? Throw it out there. Anybody?
Body fat.
Yes, body fat. What else? Blood pressure.
Etc.
Body weight, right? You guys get the idea. It's like a trick question. This is the most common answer people give, right? Because it's all they know. You go to a doctor and they tell you if you're healthy or not. So how do we translate fitness to your health? How do they relate to each other? Right? That's really the tricky question. I said fitness is a snapshot of who you are right now, the ability to do anything, right? Developing that capacity. Your health is the ability to do anything for as long as possible. That people don't, this is one of the biggest takeaways for health, that people get obsessed with being fit and being healthy as kind of these 2 separate ideas. But I'm going to draw this for you. I drew this in some of my former lectures and people really liked it. Imagine this graph of this is quality of life and this is age. Have you guys seen this? When you're young, life is amazing. High quality of life, right? But over time, things seem to wane a bit, right? And then what do we think about life when we get old? Most people are like, yay, getting old, right? Getting old sucks. Why? I mean, that's the question, right? We're asking. Things tend to taper off as you get older, quality of life. We're arguing that a major piece of that is your function, right? That you lose the ability to do things, particularly if you lose independence, right? You can't carry things on your own, go up and down stairs. That's where quality of life really drops off. And what we're trying to do is keep this line as high as possible until someday you die, right? You just don't wake up someday, and every day before that was amazing, right? But the idea is when people are thinking about their health, thinking about getting old, right, that they don't relate fitness. They seem to be obsessed with what the doctor's telling them, and we think the doctor should be testing your 400-meter run times and if you can do any pull-ups, right? And we want you to associate those 2 things. And the story that we tell is about a 90-year-old man that goes to the doctor and he can do anything, and the doctor says, "You've got high cholesterol." Does it matter? Right? That's the idea. That your function is critical. And if you chase improved function, improved fitness, typically to do that, to find continual improvement, you have to address things like, excess body fat. You have to eat relatively well to recover properly to continually find improved fitness. Right? You're lucky. You got 100% quality of life. All right? So that's the idea of health, okay? That it translates to your fitness long term, okay? So what is CrossFit? CrossFit is our argument that it's the best way to achieve these goals, okay? Do you know the definition of CrossFit? Oh, wait.
Yes, I do.
Did you see it? What is it?
It's constantly varied movement across and performed with high intensity or something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
It's 3 things, technically. It's constantly varied, functional movement
Functional movements, yeah.
at high intensity. Right? Hi, sweetie. So that's the textbook definition, right? But what I'm going to do right now is I think that CrossFit, I've decided this year I want to become more of a CrossFit advocate. I think CrossFit is somewhat misunderstood, and I also think that it's become normal. Right? Back in the day when I started, hi sweetie, when I started, nobody knew what CrossFit was, right? It was kind of exciting, and now it's become somewhat normal. There's a lot of offshoots of things that are CrossFit-like, and people saying like, you know, they're not taking time to really discuss the purpose of CrossFit and how it can have a bigger impact on your life than just a group exercise program, right? And that's what I want people to understand is what we're really all doing here. So I'm going to give you a brief history of CrossFit, right? I talked about this guy, Greg Glassman. CrossFit was officially founded in 2001, okay? He was the son of a rocket scientist, and his whole life, his whole world was based on the scientific method, which is why he wanted to come up with, as a trainer, he was a gymnast and fitness enthusiast and became a personal trainer. He was like, how do I quantify someone's results? That's how he came up with the idea of testing, right? Well, you have to test things. You got to put them on a chart, and then you have to retest them later, right? And then you can get data points and see if they're improving. You can actually measure their fitness. You got to test a whole lot of things. And then he thought, well, I'm only working with my clients, right? So then he started posting on CrossFit.com a workout of the day. He put a free workout out there saying, hey, if you do this, can you post your results so I can see what's going on? Tell me how you're doing. And it was this free open source community. He just was putting workouts out there, making videos, he started something called a CrossFit Journal, saying, here's my methodology. What do you think of it? Of course, he defended it, tooth and nail, that he thought what he was doing was the best. But he's just saying, I want data. I want to hear what's going on with this stuff. And over time, somebody contacted him from a police training academy in Jacksonville, Florida. They found this website. They were putting their cadets through CrossFit workouts, and it was fucking killing them, right? They were like, oh my God, like this is like the best workouts. It's testing them mentally and physically. The methodology seems to make sense. And they contacted him and said, hey, we're going to send our trainers out there. We want you to certify them in what you do. And he said, well, I don't do that. I'm just a guy posting stuff. And they're like, well, we're going to send them out anyway, right? And that was the first certification for CrossFit, right? It happened completely organically. And then some other people heard about it, and they asked if they could get certified. And guess what happened eventually as well? Someone said, hey, can I open my own CrossFit gym? And he's like, yeah, that's fucking cool. Totally, right? And it was like similar time, like the guys in Jacksonville wanted to do it, and someone up in Seattle. He's like, this will be great. We'll have like a north, south, east, west CrossFit, right? And they were like, well, do you want any money for this? He's like, well, I don't know. Give me like $300, right? And this is how the affiliation process started. And I think that this is critical to understanding CrossFit. It was a ton of people online doing the workouts on their own. This is how I found it, right? I was doing it on my own, in my kitchen, in the park, with minimal equipment, finding workouts that work for me, right? And people all over the world were doing that. Certifications happened organically, affiliations happened organically, and then it just started growing from there. And all they did was try to keep up with the growth. They were consistently behind the ball. The growth was continuously faster than they could keep up with, right? And the CrossFit Games, do you guys know how that started? It's fucking crazy. So now they have all these affiliates, and one of the guys, Dave Castro, who's now a famous organizer of the CrossFit Games, he owned a big piece of land outside of San Francisco in Aromas, California. And he's like, hey, I got this big piece of land. Why don't we invite all of the CrossFitters of the world? It's an open invitation, and we'll test them all in CrossFit. We'll do 3 workouts in 3 days, and at the end we'll say this is the fittest man and woman on the planet. It'll be like a fun backyard barbecue, right? And the first year, like 100 people showed up, and then they did 3 different workouts. And the next year, 380 people showed up or something like that. And they realized, like, fuck, we can't do this again. There's going to be too many people, right? So they had a qualifying segment to get in, but there were too many people in the qualifiers. So they did 2 levels of qualifiers to make sure they can get it. And then they realized, like, fuck, this is, like, we can't, we had a sectional, the only year they did something called a sectional at UCLA, right? And there was a wait list. People couldn't get in. And they said, if we truly want to say that we're doing a test of fitness to find the fittest man and woman on planet, well, someone can say, well, I'm actually fitter, but I couldn't get in, right? So they said, okay, we're going to do this thing called the CrossFit Games Open, which we're going to have all the affiliates do, and it's somewhat of an honor code, but at least we'll get an open source, as big a net as possible to try to get everyone involved. And it's become the world's #1 participatory sporting event, right? And again, I think this is important to understand about CrossFit because it's one of the few things I see in the world of health and fitness that's not based on how to make money. It's been based on they're only trying to support, the community of people that are participating, right? And that's what we've been trying to do in here. So if you guys don't know, the way this is set up is CrossFit has no say over what I do. I give them $1,000 a year to use their name, that's it. They can't tell me what to do at all. They take 0% of my revenue, right? We're totally free in here to experiment and to use their methodology however we want to try to help people as much as possible. They make most of their money on just certifying trainers so that they can do what I do, right? So we founded in 2009, and 2008 I was in a park. 2009 we opened the first building, and we were maybe like 4,000th affiliate ever. And if you haven't heard me say this, there are now more than 13,000 more CrossFit affiliates than Starbucks in the world, which is pretty wild, and still growing pretty rapidly because they've made it really easy for gyms to open. Who here's visited another CrossFit gym? Yeah, it's pretty cool. So once you learn the basics, there's now a CrossFit everywhere. It's like you're part of a club. You can travel around. You have people that can tell you about the area that you're in, and you can also see how every gym's a little different. Some are better than others, right? But that's a quick history of CrossFit. So now that we kind of have this idea, what is health, what is fitness, what is CrossFit generally, we're going to talk about some specifics, all right? So at our gym, how we came up to our programming, like what you experienced, I talk about it as our primary product, is the group class, but there's really a lot to it. It wasn't born this way. And so there's two kind of guiding philosophies that we'll talk about. One is everything is everything, which I discussed earlier, that it's not just working out, but it's your lifestyle outside the gym. Most people are only here for an hour to 2, some a little longer every day, but we're out there a lot more than we are in here. And then the idea of individual freedom and responsibility, that you have to participate. It's not just buying a membership and everything's taken care of, that this is a two-way street. And for a lot of people, that's a different approach to a gym environment. But this is the basics of everything is everything. Sleep, stress, and recovery we'll talk about. We'll talk about some nutrition. And then this is another big one is quality movement. Individual freedom and responsibility, that we are all unique snowflakes and every life is different. There's no perfect way to live your life, no perfect way to eat. You have to do the work, and that this is something I say all the time to people. Group class is inherently a compromise to your goals. As good as we can make our programming, it is never going to be perfect for you, right? You'll always have to do some extra work on top of it if you want to optimize your results. CrossFit generally is amazing, right? But there's that, the idea of plateaus. And what I was just telling Tim, if he's still here, one of the dirty secrets is that the fitter you get, the harder it gets. If you haven't heard my analogy of the car analogy, right? Taking care of a Camry is really easy. The parts are cheap and it'll just run forever, right? But a Ferrari is not only more expensive, but all the parts are more expensive. You got to maintain it all the time if you want to maintain that high performance. That's you, right? The better you get, you want to lift heavy, you have to warm up longer, right? You need to work harder to continue to find improvement. So it's on you guys to keep pushing yourselves to get there, right? It's not a passive process. So those two ideas kind of run through a lot of what we do. The programming, quick history, CrossFit.com, I talked about where it all began. When we opened our gym, that's what we did for workouts. We actually did this on the day. So we didn't know what tomorrow's workout was going to be until 5 p.m. today. And everyone in the gym was like, oh my God, what's it going to be, right? Just imagine that. And sometimes they would post a workout that would take like an hour and a half. We're like, fuck, right? Or like a one workout that every athlete would have to have 3 barbells for themselves, you know, like it was, but our argument was, you know that we're not programming for what's easiest for us. This is legit programming that is about testing you, and we're gonna get through it together as a community, right? And we did that for years. And the way their programming works is 3 days on, 1 day off, which meant that the rest days were always rotating as well, all right? But what we found over time, over the course of years of this, was that some of our more experienced athletes started to plateau. That we realized that main site wasn't necessarily the best developmental program, but a really good test of fitness, right? Good exposure to different things, and you could find out what you weren't good at. But let's say you wanted to get good at Olympic lifting, or you wanted to get stronger at your back squat, right? There was no consistency there for the more advanced athletes to find improvement. And we went to a program called the Outlaw Way. And this is actually where we got the term everything is everything. They're heavily focused on Olympic lifting. And this, for us as a gym, was a major shifting point. When we shifted the Outlaw Way, it's crazy to look back on. We were doing Olympic lifting in class 5 days a week, right? 5 days a week in our strength portion. As you can imagine, some people did not love this, right? And we were arguing the value of it. And they're saying everything is, if you can snatch really well, every other barbell movement's easy. If you can figure out how to do a heavy snatch, a thruster's easy, wall balls are easy, everything, pressing, everything's easy, right? So just focus on those and you'll get good at everything, because movement translates, right? Find the hardest thing, get good at that, and the easier stuff is no problem, right? And what happened was, it was a competitive-based program. We were really giving into what our community wanted. They wanted to get better at the sport of CrossFit. They wanted to get better at Olympic lifting. They wanted to get stronger. And we grew. We had a wait list at Marina Gym for 1.5 years under this program, right? It was crazy. We opened Venice Gym, and a series of things happened. But basically, we found that we had become so specialized and so good as a general community that it was intimidating for other people to walk through the door. Like, they looked at our group class and they were like, oh, I can't do this. Are you fucking insane? Right? And we had a group on-ramp program where people would come in and we'd say, okay, here's how it works. And they couldn't, people like, I was like, just trust me. We made these people like this, right? Trust, we can do this for you as well. But it was too specialized. It was a lot of barbell. And we realized that we had kind of moved a little bit away from general health and fitness. Hello. And so we switched gears again. Invictus is another competitive program. And again, the idea is that programming is hard, so we were using other people's and focusing on just the coaching of it. And Invictus, we tried a 2-tiered, 2 things happening in the same class at the same time. We had one that was more for competitors and one that was for general health and fitness in the same class. We'd have 2 coaches in every class, and it was a disaster. Can you guys guess why?
Not enough attention?
Not exactly.
Space?
Kind of.
Psychological?
Yeah. So if I don't do competitor, am I not as good, right? Like, think about what's one of the best parts of what we do in here? It's the community, right? We split the community in half, right? And we realized that while a lot of people needed this general health and fitness type program, it was not optimal for what we were doing. Yeah, it wasn't good. So from there, we experimented that briefly and tried to argue for it, but it didn't work. So we switched to basically me doing the programming and taking what I had learned over the previous few years. And we started this new idea of what we have developed today, which is we wanted consistency, but we still wanted to have some fun. We still want to make it accessible to everybody. And so we started the 8-week training cycle. And the idea was, it wasn't random. For 8 weeks, in the strength portion in particular, you're going to get consistent work. And people would say, well, I can't make it on Fridays, and I'm never going to get good at my deadlift because that's on Fridays. Say, well, you can't get good at everything all at once, right? Pick the days that you can come, and you'll get good at those things, and we'll change things up as we go forward. And also, one of the challenges with what we do is, have you guys ever been in a class where maybe the coach instructs a movement for a while and you're like, I already know how to do it, I need to warm up, right? And then you only have like 15 minutes to get to your weight, right? And so there's this challenge of, like I said, the advanced athletes need more time to warm up, and the newer people need more instruction. If we repeat regularly, there's not as much pressure to do everything all in one class. Like, hey, we're going to build on this next week, and we can move on. So it allowed us to really kind of hit a lot of those points, and that was how we got to the 8-week cycle, right? It allowed us to maximize the hour for class. New athletes could learn while advanced athletes would have more time. The testing and transition weeks is the idea that at the end of that we could retest and have this kind of regular system that you'll see, which is establishing short-term goals, right, for long-term health and fitness goals, right? So we're just focused on something for a short period of time and know that we're going to test and transition and then move on to another short-term goal. And over time, you just keep getting fitter is the idea, and it works pretty well. The CrossFit Games Open and the PCF World Championships, these are, I view as our two big tests of the year. So the Open is coming up, and the World Championships is another one, is 2 events. And we see that people, the competitive mindset is one of the big challenges that we have in here. I believe that everyone should view themselves as an athlete and as a competitor, and that you need to participate in some type of athletic event. I think it provides focus, even if it's scary, right? Putting yourself out there is really important, and it allows your training to have purpose. And having those deadlines and those things within the gym, even though we do it every day in class, some people still like, oh, I can't do that, right? The Open is literally just what we do in class, except you have a judge, right? But people feel intimidated by it, right? Because somehow, just that mentality, they're not used to it. The anxiety is something they're not comfortable with. And we want to help encourage people to move into those areas and show them that it's okay if you're not great, right? But the idea of testing yourself and putting your fitness to the test, your training, what you're doing to the test, is really an important part of the process. So that's our, kind of whole programming idea. Anyone have any questions on programming? What you guys see in class ever? All right. So some common questions. How often should I come in? What's the best way to scale? And how do I get better at some movement? How often should you come in? All right. I'd say this is one of our number one things. This is like a rest recovery conversation, right? This depends on your athletic background, your current level of fitness, and your ability to recover, which is based on age, how much you sleep, and your nutrition. New athletes, 2 to 3 times a week for new athletes, okay, is a general advice. If you are just getting into CrossFit, you come in, we want to prioritize, and I'll talk about this in a bit, but we want to prioritize quality movement and high intensity, okay? If you're sore as fuck and you can't move properly, right, your intensity goes down and the adaptation that your body's getting is not as good, right? Remember, a little bit goes a long way. And in the beginning, it's overwhelming. We want you to show up focused on what you're doing that day, check in advance, prepare for class. 5 to 6 times a week for advanced athletes, no more than 3 days in a row for any athlete. What I mean here is of high intensity training. The reason that CrossFit.com does 3 days on, 1 day off is because through the guy that founded studies, found that if you do more than 3 days in a row of super intense work, the 4th day you're getting diminished returns, right? It doesn't mean you don't have to do anything, but the intensity drops, your body hasn't recovered properly from 3 days of hard work. And this is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. More is not better, right? There's a lot of other things that you can work on. You can work on your weaknesses, you can do low intensity training, right? But give your body a chance to recover. Work on the things that you need to work on, okay? Keep blood flowing, that helps recovery, right? Sleep in that day if you work out in the morning, right? Prepare your meals. Do something for your health and fitness, but just coming in and beating the shit out of yourself more does not get you fitter faster. I cannot tell you how many times I hear people say stuff like, oh, I'm going on vacation, and they'll come in like 10 days in a row. They're gonna bank it up, right? for their vacation, right? It doesn't work that way, all right? Recovery is everything, okay? So, yes, recovery is where we make our gains. I'll talk a little bit more about that. What's the best way to scale is what I just said. Always prioritize quality movement and high intensity above all else for conditioning, okay? Don't always just scale the weight, but feel free to scale the reps as well. This is something I see often, but thinking about it, this is the critical piece. The coach should be able to help you with this, but thinking about the way it's designed. This is kind of hard when you're new. But you look at something and you think, is this something, it's got, 50 reps of something. Is that designed to be done like in 1 or 2 big sets? Or is it something I'm supposed to be struggling through, doing singles the entire time, right? Trying to pinpoint what the design is that will help you scale it appropriately. Does that make sense? So that will push you in the right direction of, should I scale the reps? Should I scale the weight, right? And that's, I think, a critical part, because people ask all the time, what's better? Should I scale this or should I scale that? And I just say, well, it's not one perfect answer, right? Particularly for some of the more complex movements, like how do you scale ring muscle ups, right? There isn't one perfect answer for that, right? Some days you can work on your transitioning. Some days you can work on your pull-ups and your dips if you don't have those yet. Some days you might just want to get the cardio out of it and do a burpee pull-up, right? But the idea is more, which I'll talk about next, which is how do you get to those things? You have to focus on the things you can't do. You have to work on that supplementally. This is the idea in group class, right? It's always going to be a compromise. Some days we have more time to coach stuff. Other days it's more about working through it, right? The coach is providing basic guidance, scaling suggestions, and it's about a training day. Other days we have more time to coach, but getting better at a movement, right? The importance of self-coaching. This is something that I think everyone can improve at. My number one recommendation is to film yourself. Everyone should film themselves. It's really valuable. We talk about visualizing success, right? It allows you to actually see in your mind's eye what's going on. Oftentimes, particularly for complex movements, I see people use it for lifting more than I do gymnastics, but gymnastics is equally important. We all have a phone. You can slow it down. You can look at it frame by frame, right? And you can say, oh shit, that's what's going on. That's why they keep saying that to me, right? And so you don't have to be an expert, but like just looking at yourself. And then when you watch other people, you start to see things, right? And so that's just the education of yourself, that personal responsibility for improving at something. To do that, we have a video library. I haven't redone every video into a new, cool video, but I have an insane number of videos on our YouTube channel. The website's not perfect yet, but there's a ton of stuff. And this is where, again, following up with you guys, if you want to ask, recently I've been talking a lot about toes to bar, like how do I get better at toes to bar? I put a video together for like an exact program, how to get better at that. How to get better at a strict pull-up, how to get better at a push-up, how to get better at burpees, how to get better at a wall ball, right? These are things you can do on your own on those recovery days or just when you want to come to the gym and do some work. That having a plan and a progression forward. Oh, another big one, double unders. I see so many people struggle with double unders because they don't have they're just trying. They just keep trying over and they don't have kind of like this game plan. And so in my video, I try to give people, and when I talk to people, you should have this progression laid out before you that's clear, right? Accomplish this, and I'll eventually get there. So it's not so scary or frustrating. And then, of course, we have private training. You can always hire somebody, not financially reasonable for everybody, but this is the optimal way to get to where you want to go, working with a coach personally. And then we do have the PCF University classes every 3 to 4 months that focus on some of these things as well. But this is the type of thing I want to hear from you guys after today. Specifically, if you're like, hey, I have this thing, I can't seem to get better at it. And we have a lot of resources that a lot of people aren't aware of. So let me know and I can pass that along. So Oh, that's everything is everything. The philosophy, and we use it both for the how to get better at a movement. It's people want to get better at everything. Say pick one thing. If you get really good at double unders, it creates body tension. You're bouncing, right? You get better at running. You get better at box jumps. So just focusing on one thing doesn't mean that you're going to miss out on getting better at other things. Oftentimes you get better at one thing and I got better at a whole bunch of other things, right? And that's what we're going to talk about here, is foundational movements and positions. Some people are skipping to the advanced stuff, the curse of the novice, right? They want to get good at all the fancy stuff, but they don't know how to squat properly or perform some basic movements. So this is where we're going to kind of do a little bit of movement and self-assessment and coaching of each other. I wasn't sure how many people would show up today, so I didn't have this planned out perfectly. But some people know this stuff more than others, but here is our list of foundational movements and positions. Midline stability. This actually took me a while to understand, as silly as it sounds, but the idea is, think about your spinal position from the top of your head through your hips. This should always be in one position or another. And your arms and legs just move around that. Can you guys understand that? Right? So all of our movement, you've got to put this into a strong position first. And you have to be aware of what's going on there. Right? Because let's say I'm pressing something overhead. Right? A lot of people think, like, okay, I'm using my arms. But the platform is here. Right? So if this thing wobbles around, it's a lot harder to press the weight. Okay? And this, understanding how to control this is everything for every movement. It's the number one thing. People don't know how to create tension here, and it means that the other stuff that's working isn't going to be as efficient, right? Being able to squat, obvious in here. We'll talk about all these individually. Hip hinge, lifting, right? Using our hamstrings. Overhead position, I mean both pressing and or hanging and swinging on a bar. We're going to talk about gymnastic basics, Olympic lifting basics, and some running basics. These are kind of the foundational movements. Olympic lifting is advanced, and there are advanced gymnastic movements, but they're important for you guys to think about, particularly for what we do in here and why we do them. So let's start with midline stability. So everybody stand up.